What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ask Paul on paulabernathy.com. Look, if you got electrical questions and you want answers and you're struggling to find somebody that you can trust an answer from, or at least somebody that can give you a validated opinion, whether you agree or disagree, it's perfectly fine. But we've got the answer. If you want to go to paulabernathy.com, that's paulabernathy.com. It is sponsored by Electrical Code Academy, and it is my way of being able to give back and answer questions for the electrical industry, whether it's electrical contracting, business, marketing for electrical contractors. I've been there, done that, been successful, been some not so successful for certain things, and I'm more than happy to tell you when I wasn't. All those type of things when it comes to the National Electrical Code, questions, grounding, bonding, whatever it may be. If you've got a question, I'm willing to try to answer it for you and give you a logical, well thought out response. So go on over to paulabernathy.com and submit your question. You just got to give your name, email address, and post your question. Everybody's welcome. Doesn't really matter who it is. So make sure you do that, and you can have your question reviewed here on an upcoming Ask Paul. And I will say the Ask Paul segments are by far now my most popular podcast scenario. Now we have over, millions of downloads since I've started. I've got literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts. But the Ask Paul segment, I think we're up to episode 53. Boy, how time flies on the Ask Paul. And so there's so many topics. I encourage you to go back and listen to them. If you want to hear them, you can actually listen to them from a lot of things like Spreaker, Spotify's, all these other different podcast platforms. They're all available. Just go for the Ask Paul. In fact, on your Alexa device, you can even ask to play me National Electrical Code podcast, and you'd be surprised that I usually pop up. But if you want to listen directly from your phone, browser, whatnot, then you can go right to paulabernathy.com. You can actually listen to every podcast directly from that website. Of course, you could also go to Electrician Live. That's electricianlive.com. And there you can listen to and watch some of the videos from Electrify back in me and Jay's Electrician Live are still up there. You can listen to a bunch of shows. And also, Kicking It with the King will be coming soon. There's been a slight delay as we produce an intro for that and had a guy that's doing that, but he's going to finish it this weekend. And we should be able to get some of those. So you can get some of the insight on Jay and how he runs his business. That's going to be awesome too. But at any rate, I am willing to answer your questions, so make sure you submit them over on the portal. Also, if you want any unique swag, anything with electrician on it, show your pride, shirts, Code Mafia, whatever you want, go visit electricianpride.com, and you can find all kinds of goodies over there, from hats to bags to shirts to hoodies and sweaters and just whatever. Check it out. Stickers, things like that. Show your pride. Also, you can get the coffee hour mug as well there, and that's one of our other popular shows now is Coffee Hour. I love coffee, and I love talking code, so it made sense. So a lot of times you'll get a coffee hour, and I'll talk code. In fact, the latest ones that I did were dealing with multi-family dwellings, and it's a multi-part series on that subject. So I did one on multi-family buildings using the standard method, and I did one using the optional method for the service, right? And soon, I'm going to be coming out with a coffee hour, so that's why you got to subscribe, for the individual dwelling units using the standard versus the optional method. Now, we all know most of the time you're going to use the optional, but anyway, I like to teach you both, especially if you're preparing for an exam. So make sure you subscribe to that and share it. You don't have to love me, but you can still learn from me. I'm more than happy to try to educate you if I can. All right, so let's get into today's topic. So we have a question that was sent, and I'm thinking this one might go pretty quick, but we'll see, because I have a tendency to turn something 5 minutes into 35 minutes or an hour. And also people say, Paul, why are you so redundant? It's because that's my teaching style. Again, you can choose to listen or not. That's your option. But I'm here to try to teach you, so I'll do my best. But when I do get redundant, it's because I feel that there are certain elements of what I'm saying that I'm trying to hammer into your head. And I created a redundancy teaching style 30 years ago, and it's just how I do it. Okay? All right. So the question is, and I'm going to do this, it says, Dear Paul, can you please explain if it is okay to backstab receptacles? I hear from many people who call me a hack because I like to backstab. Now, don't get me wrong. I have also wrapped the screw, but when there's backstabs available, I like to use them. Oh, and by the way, what is your opinion of Wagos? Thanks in advance. Okay, good question. Good question. So me and Jay actually, the Basement King, me and Jay actually did an electrician live on this where we talked about the Wagos. And there's different types of Wagos, by the way. There's some with the lever that you lift up and you put it in and it comes down on it, spring actuated. And there's some that you just push straight in as well, depending on the different sizes, whether it's stranded versus solid or whatnot. And so we discussed the Wagos. We discussed them at great depth. And some people just don't like them. They don't really know why. And they have some cases where they see some burned up receptacles and they go, this is why. Or they've seen some burned up wire nuts and they go, this is why. I will tell you in my, and I know I'm kind of went off of the backstabbing thing, but in my experience, I did a lot of service work. I saw more issues with improperly done splices using wire nuts or wire binding devices. I guess wire nuts are trademarked by Ideal, but wire binding devices like wire nuts or Gorilla Nuts or whatever. When people do those improperly or they don't do it right, you have the same potential for issue, right? The one thing that people seem to be upset about with the Wagos, and again, I'll get tons of hate mail over this probably. People calling me a hack, that's fine. They'd probably have maybe a third of the experience that I have in the industry, but they're willing to call somebody a hack. That's pretty typical, I guess, for our industry. You don't see plumbers and HVAC guys doing that crap, but I guess it's electrical. Everybody's the best. But at the end of the day, they go, oh, I've seen this, I've seen that. Like their experience is representation of the millions of these devices that are installed, right? If you install, now you got to remember that if the Wagos are listed and they're evaluated, and they're usually going to have a UL mark on them, ETL mark, or whatever NERDL, Nationally Recognized Testing Laboratory mark on them, then they've been evaluated for their use. Anything that's installed wrong could malfunction, right? It could break down. If you follow the instructions and you truly know how to use it, then you have a lesser risk of a malfunction, but anything can malfunction. And I find that when somebody installs these improperly, now you got to remember that when I did use these, more often than not, a lot of them were in recess cans, and they were already in the junction box for the recess cans, and we used them. I mean, I'm not cutting them, and a lot of people say, well, I'll just cut it off and splice it. That's fine, but we used them. I have, to this day, knock on wood, and I installed a lot of them. We haven't had any issues with them. Never had a problem with them. When they're installed properly and you use the right size conductors with it, you do everything right, you shouldn't have any issues with it. Now, here's the thing. And I know I kind of went at this backwards, right? Because the real question was about backstabbing receptacles and things like that. But since we're on that topic and he asked about the Wagos, I'll start it at the end and move forward. Because that's just how I roll. And so what we've got is, I'm like, look, if they are evaluated, they are listed, they're being sold by manufacturers who certainly don't want to have an elevated risk of liability, They're being used, they're being marketed, they're being sold. Just because one electrician has an opinion and another electrician has opinion, and they seem to go on the message boards and voice their opinion. You got to remember the message boards online, LinkedIn, well, not so much LinkedIn, Instagrams and TikToks of the world, the TikToktricians and the Instagram wannabes. At the end of the day, they don't represent a larger swath, if you will, of the industry. That's just the fanboys that want to go on the social media and pound their chest and say, oh, I've seen a fire, or I had a fire, or I had one melt. Great. The good news is you're skilled enough that you found the problem. Congratulations. But at the end of the day, there's so many being sold. We're not, if there was going to be a rampant fire or rampant problems with these things, they would have been recalled. We'd have a product safety commission recall. We would have issues. If they're used properly, they are fine. Now, it is true that usually with these kind of, and this goes the same for backwire, by the way, is when you're using these, there is not as much surface area contact at the termination between the device and the actual conductive material, like the copper, because of the nature of it. But with a lot of these, it is a flat surface to flat surface that kind of cradles the conductor. We're not talking about just sharp points that touch. But they're like anything. They can be bad, or they can be defective, or it can be a poor install, or you didn't follow the stripping guide. You didn't strip off enough. How many people actually follow the instructions? Probably very few. But overall, collectively, and I have to tell you, I would have my pulse on the industry more than most people because, I work with NEMA, and these things aren't new. And I just don't see the issue. I mean, I have found just as many issues with improperly installed wire nuts. I'm just saying. So I don't think a lot of hype about it. If you want to use them, they're a listed product. You buy them, you use them properly. You shouldn't have any problem with it. So then that transitions me into the backstabbing. Boy, I'll tell you what, there is nothing more on the Instagrams or the TikToks or TikToktricians who want to be, who still post their work online. And Trade Hounds is also just as bad. Some good ones over there, but it's just as bad. They'll post their pictures of their pretty work, yet it's riddled with code violations. Now, I'm not against people posting good-looking work. I mean, I like it. Pride is everything. I love when you take pride in your work. Just be careful about what you post. I'm just saying. Because if it's riddled with code violations and somebody brings that up, then all of a sudden I'm a hater for some reason. And all I'm trying to do is educate you because, dude, you're sharing something that has code violations in it that people are going to pick apart. But it still looks pretty. So, hey, there you go. But when it comes to backstabbing, nothing seems to hit a chord more in this industry than backstabbing. And it's two different meanings now. We have tons of backstabbers in this industry, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about backstabbing the back of a device. And I venture to say that majority of the people that dislike backstabbing have never used the stripping guide on the device to know exactly how much. You know what? If you open up the package of a receptacle that has a backstabbing in it, if you open it up, and a lot of the inside of the box has instructions on it. And it'll tell you the largest size conductor you can take to it. It'll let you know whether it's copper or whether it can be copper clad, whether it can be, it'll let you know all these things if you ever opened one up to look at it. And it will have a strip guide on it. And a lot of times that'll be on the device as well. This is how much you strip if you're going to backstab. And how many times do electricians just open that up and just throw that away? They never pay any attention to it whatsoever. I can tell you with 100% certainty that when a receptacle that permits backstabbing of the appropriate size conductors that it's designed for, that it has been evaluated as such. There is no way, shape, or form that a manufacturer like an Eaton or a Leviton or a Pass and Seymour, any of those large manufacturers of devices, there is absolutely no way that they're not have put those devices through the paces using the backstab or the side terminals. Now, let me tell you something. I will tell you something that I run into a lot. I can also tell you with 100% certainty that all electricians, well, let me rephrase that because I can't say all. There's a rare few. And I'm not saying I'm in either one of these categories, right? Because as many of you pointed out, I don't install electrical work anymore because, I'm just, I'm a teacher. I'm not a doer. I don't know how to do it anymore. I just teach. Y'all, trust me, y'all reminded me that this is all I can do because I can't do it anymore. I get it, okay? Anyway, what they're saying is that the backstab is wrong, yet the majority of the applications that I found, even if you date back to the 90s when we had issues of terminal problems, even back if you go back to aluminum conductors back in the late 60s, early 70s, the issue wasn't as much the conductor as it was the termination, right? And so speed forward, we had the NFPA test when it came to terminations and receptacles and fires associated with it. It really boiled down to terminations. Well, those weren't backstabs. Those were terminals. So there are so many people that don't install the conductor right, even if it's on a terminal. And you got to remember something now. They're supposed to be torqued. Now, I get it. Most people, if you tell them 110.14D, they get glassy-eyed. Or if you mentioned prior to that, it was 110.3B required torquing. Trust me. Chances are that you listening to this podcast, that when you install your receptacles, that you pull out a torquing screwdriver. I'm just saying. There's a good, you know who you are. It's good probability. Now, I'm not saying I do. I'm just telling you the facts. And if you go watch any video on an installation of a receptacle on any YouTube channel, I can guarantee you that you never see a torque screwdriver being used. Guarantee. Okay? So whether or not, and I also tell you that instructions for that device, whether it's inside the cardboard container, has a torquing requirement for those lugs. Okay? Trust me, it will. So chances are we don't do that. So you have to remember that when somebody's tightening it, if it's too loose and you've got current flowing through it, you create an arc. Arc can equate to heat. Well, it will equate to heat. And it will rise as the arcing intensifies or as the current intensifies. Now, with that said, if it's a poor termination either way, or if you don't torque it right either way, then you run the risk of an issue. And tighter is not always better, because there is also a situation where you over tighten a conductor onto a screw, providing you put it on the screw properly, that you tighten it so tight that you strip it out and it actually works its way loose. It might be tight when you leave it, but you overdid it and you've damaged it. You hear that click and you're thinking, oh crap, I better stop. And then as that conductor heats up, expands and contracts during a load, it could loosen up and you have problems at that termination. So it is not infallible to terminate improperly or have potential issues, because as an industry, we don't follow torquing rules. I mean, we just don't. Now, we've gotten used to doing that on services and feeders, and that's checked all the time. And, when 110.14D, started being really prominent, even though it was always there in 110.3B, because the manufacturers gave this value that you had to adhere to. But when it became really evident that it was an issue and it got into the code as its own separate section in 110, people started saying, well, how do I enforce this? And it's easy to do it at service equipment. It's easy to do it at feeders. But again, when you start going down the line, people just don't do it. Now, talk about backstabbing. In a backstab, you don't have to worry about torquing. Too tight, too loose, damaging it. All you have to do is make sure that you strip the right amount of wire and that you poke it in the hole, and you don't try to stick a 12 and a 14 hole. You follow what's on the listing. You with me? So for everybody out there who just jumps all over the backstab thing, there is so many other issues that I've seen through the years, and I get called out as an expert witness. Through the years, I've done quite a few. I've seen terminals melt down. I've seen poor connections. I have seen so many things done where it's just a simple conductor to a screw. That's it. Just a conductor to a screw, but still done improperly. I've seen people not strip enough, and then when they put it in, they get too much insulation under the screw, and they tighten it down, but it's not fully tight on the conductor. There's so many things that they do, and then you put it under load, and I've seen people, again, over-tighten it and crack it, but still leave it there, and then over time, when it expands and contracts, it becomes a loose connection, because there's a reason they do give you torque values, by the way, right? You can't just tighten it down to just crank it. So at the end of the day, there's a reason why the manufacturers do this. And don't worry, because if a fire happens and because you tightened it too far and broke it, don't worry. Somebody like me will be able to find out exactly what you crushed it to. And don't worry about trying to get any recovery from the manufacturer, because you're going to be on your own, buddy. You're the one that damaged the product. But with a backstab, where it's permitted, then it's been listed. It's been evaluated. Use it. There's not a problem. Which also brings me to the question I had in an Ask Paul the other day. They said, Paul, could you use all the terminals and the backstabs on, say, a 15 amp receptacle? My answer to that is absolutely. If I got 2 terminals for the two hot screws and I got 2 back wires, if I want, again, you got to know about box fill and make sure that that accommodates all that. But let's assume that was all okay. Can I use all those terminals? Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely I can. Show me where it says you can't. So at the end of the day, unless, of course, the manufacturer's instructions say you can't. Now, if the manufacturer's instructions say when you use the screws, you can't use the backstabs, or if you use the backstabs, you can't use the screws, then okay. But that's part of the manufacturer's instructions. That would be a 110.3b. And that's why you get instructions, right? Right. All right, so hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, I did take a liberty of opining about it and going a little bit further than most people would in giving my opinion. I am neither here nor there. Backstabs, fine, where permitted in the device that's being used. Wagos, I have no problem with them. As long as you're using the right kind. They come in different sizes. Some can handle stranded, some cannot. They're not one size fits all. There's different different designs. Just look at what you're using and then follow the rules, and you're not going to have any problem. Now, you're an electrician that's going to disagree. Chances are you have zero amount of experience in this, and you probably only ran into one situation where you saw one go bad or 2 go bad. That does not, you do you, but collectively as an industry, if this was a widespread issue, then they would be pulled off the market. They just would be. Okay, there's enough people out there in watchdog groups that are actually looking at these things, and if that was the case, you can bet your butt that a manufacturer of a wire nut would go after a manufacturer of a Wago if they felt that it was a safety hazard in the industry. We as manufacturers do that all the time. We're trying to raise the bar of safety. Yeah, we're trying to sell products, but we're also trying to raise the bar of safety because most of the codes and standard folks have a moral compass. And we can adhere to that moral compass even at the expense of our companies. Because we want to do what's right. Now, you can agree with that or disagree. I'm not going to debate that. Everybody has their opinions. Usually they're from the outside. They're not from the inside, so they don't really have a clue how all this works. But at the end of the day, that is my opinion, and hopefully you go out there and buy a bunch of Wagos if they work for you, or continue backstabbing if that's what you do. And if you don't like backstabbing, then guess what? Don't backstab. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. And remember, if you want your question answered, all you got to do is go to paulabernathy.com, put in your name, put in your email, and put in your question, and I will answer that question on an upcoming episode of Ask Paul. Till next time, take care.